My friends, while we're hunkering down trying to keep our bodies safe, I think it's equally important that we do everything we can to ensure that our spirits don't fall victim to this pandemic. For many of us, our synagogue community is a lifeline, and Shabbat services with our friends and community, it's really an indispensable part of our emotional and spiritual well-being. And so at a time like this, when we can't physically gather, it can feel like we're out on our own in the wilderness. And thankfully, our ancestors anticipated such times and provided us with some wisdom to help us through. So I'd like to share a bit of Talmud with you. This is from the Babylonian Talmud tractate on Shabbat, 69b. Let's see what wisdom our sages can give us. Amar Rav Huna, היה מהלך במדבר ואינו יודע מתי שבת, מונה 6 ימים ומשמור יום אחד. Rav Huna said, one who's traveling or on a journey in the wilderness and does not know on which day Shabbat occurs, this person counts 6 days and then observes the 7th day as Shabbat. Now, remember, we're talking about a time before cell phones and PDAs, so someone's away, he's not around his community, he's not around other people, and he loses track of days. And suddenly he realizes, oh my God, I don't know what day Shabbat is. And for many of us right now, I think, who are staying at home, the days are seeming to run together. And every day is just like the last. So how do we carve out differences? How do we carve out sacred space in our time and our schedules? So according to Rav Huna, as we just read, as soon as this person realizes that he's lost track of Shabbat, from that very moment on, he just begins counting 6 days. And during those days, it's okay for him to work and do what needs to be done. And then on the 7th day, that he'll observe as Shabbat. Now, that's the opinion of Rav Huna, as I said, but we're Jews, so of course, there's another opinion. Chia bar Rav omer mishmor yom echad umoneh shisha. Chia bar Rav says that this person observes one day as Shabbat as soon as he figures it out, and then he counts 6 days of the week afterwards. So we're talking about the exact opposite of the other opinion. B'mai kamefligi, with regards to what do they disagree? Mar sava kivrito shel olam. One sage, that's Rav Huna, the first one, derives his position from the creation of the world, meaning like in our story in Genesis of the creation of the world, God, what does God do? God works, creates for 6 days, and then on the 7th day, then we get Shabbat. Umar savar ka'adam harishon, and the other sage, that would be Chia bar Rav, the second opinion, derives his stance from Adam harishon. Adam harishon, Adam, the first person, and I would like to expand that to also include Chava, Eve, as well. We're talking about the first human beings, the creation of humanity. Now, the creation of these first people happened on day 6, right? Adam and Eve, they're created, and so from their perspective, the first full day, which from our perspective of the Torah is the 7th day, but from their perspective, the first full day was not a work day. The first full day for them was Shabbat, right? Because they were created on the 6th day. So Chia bar Rav is counting Shabbat from a human perspective. The first sage, Rav Huna, is counting Shabbat from God's perspective. So next, the Talmud raises a challenge. Metive, hayam helech b'derech ve'eno yodea matai Shabbat mishmor yom echad l'shisha. The Talmud raises a challenge to the opinion of Chia bar Rava. That's the second opinion from man's perspective. And the Talmud uses a baraita to do so. A baraita is an earlier source. And the way the rabbinic game is played, and there are rules to the rabbinic game, earlier sources carry more weight. It's just how it is. And this earlier source says, if one is on the road and does not know which day is Shabbat, this person observes one day for every 6. Now, which day you might be asking, and the Talmud asks the same question as well because the language is unclear. My lav mona shisha umishmor yom echad. What? Doesn't this mean that he counts 6 days and then observes one day as Shabbat? And this would be like the first opinion of Rav Huna. La mishmar yom echad umona shisha. And the Talmud rejects this, saying, no, it could also just as easily be read to mean that he observes one day and then counts 6. In other words, the language here is ambiguous and could be read either way, because but if this is so, it should say so. In other words, why is it stating one day for every 6? And furthermore, it was stated in another baraita, another one of these earlier sources, and it's more clearly stated here. If one is on the road or in the wilderness and does not know which day is Shabbat, he counts 6 days and then observe the 7th. And then the Talmud finishes this section with Tiyufta bar Rav Tiyufta. This is a refutation of Chia bar Rav. The word Tiyufta is kind of Aramaic for slam. You got moted, you got beat. In other words, on this occasion in the Talmud is actually giving an answer to who's right in a particular debate, whereas many debates are not left with who's right and who's wrong, but simply a variety of opinions. So here, the counting that we accept, that the Talmud is accepting, is the counting according to Rav Huna, which is according to God's perspective, right? This person realizes they do 6 days of work, and then they observe Shabbat the same way God did 6 days of creation and then observed Shabbat. But the rabbis aren't done, because there's always more. Amar Rabba b'chol yom yom oseh lo k'dei parnasto. Rava taught, on every other day, and that means the 6 days that are not designated for Shabbat in this person's mind and accounting, on every other day of the 6, this person may only do the amount of work that is absolutely necessary to live on that day. Now that makes sense, right? Because on those 6 days, you do just what you need to survive, but no more in case one of those days happens to be the actual Shabbat. V'ahu yoma limot. So what, on the 7th day, then this person should die? In other words, don't do any work on the 7th day because that's the day you're designating as Shabbat? David mitmol shtei parnasot. So on that day before, in other words, the day that they're reckoning as the 6th day, the day before the Shabbat that they are going to be observing, you do enough work so you have enough for the next day. In other words, right, you do 2 days worth of work, or you prepare for 2 days, so on that 7th day you don't have to, and it's kind of the same reason why we have 2 loaves of challah on our Shabbos table to commemorate the time in the Bible where on the 6th day we did double measure of work. We collected a double helping of manna to sustain us through Shabbat. V'dilma mitmol Shabbat have. But there's a problem. What if that day before, the one where we're collecting double, what if that's the actual real Shabbat? Which means not only did this person break Shabbat by working, this person did double the work, chas v'shalom. Eila kol yom vayom oseh lo parnasto afilu hahu yoma. Okay, so the answer is every day, including the one that's designated for Shabbat, this person does only the amount of work needed to live on that day, right? And this is a major Jewish principle, pikuach nefesh, the preservation of life must take precedence over religious obligation. But that leaves us with a really big problem. V'ahu yoma b'mai min charle. But if this is so, how will Shabbat be any different than the other days? It's a really good question. How do any of us make Shabbat different? And the Talmud answers this. Bikdusha v'avdalta. You make Kiddush at the beginning of Shabbat, and you make Havdalah when it ends. Now, it seems simple enough, but this leaves us with the possibility of a person either A, doing prohibited work on Shabbat, which is bad enough, or B, saying Kiddush and Havdalah on potentially the wrong day, right? So on the day this person is observing Shabbat, what if it's not really the actual Shabbat, yet this person says Kiddush and Havdalah and invokes God's name? This could be considered a bracha levatala, which is a blessing in vain, and that would be a serious violation of the commandment to not take God's name in vain. But I think what the Talmud is getting at, and there's a reason why the rabbis go through this whole circular argument, because they want to arrive at a guiding principle. And I think the guiding principle here that the Talmud is teaching us is that Shabbat is a state of mind. Sure, right now we're definitely in a sense of wandering in the wilderness, like this character in the Talmud. And there's no denying that our physical connection to one another is diminished. And we could easily allow that to also affect our spiritual connections. We all observe Shabbat in our own ways, and I'm not the Shabbos police. I'm not here to tell you should do this and do that, because we all have our own connection. And these ways, regardless of how we observe, these ways are necessarily going to be different, at least for a while. And so there are things that we can do to continue to nourish our Jewish souls. There are actions that we can take to set aside time and to create sacred space. Light candles on Friday nights. Be diligent about it. And let's face it, we can all use a little bit more light in our lives about now. And we can share sacred time through our streaming Shabbat services at your regularly scheduled time, by the way, shameless plug. Since even before the destruction of the temple and the diaspora, but certainly after we were spread throughout the world, Jews have marked holiness by time, not by place. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel calls Shabbat itself a palace in time. And I'm going to read an excerpt from his book, The Sabbath. Let's see. The Sabbath is entirely independent of the month and unrelated to the moon. Its date is not determined by any event in nature, such as the new moon, but by the act of creation. Thus, the essence of the Sabbath is completely detached from the world of space. The meaning of the Sabbath is to celebrate time rather than space. 6 days a week, we live under the tyranny of things of space. On the Sabbath, we try to become attuned to the holiness in time. It is a day on which we are called upon to share in what is eternal in time, to turn from the results of creation to the mystery of creation, from the world of creation to the creation of the world. Well, that last part is too good. I'm going to have to read that again for you. It is a day on which we are called upon to share in what is eternal in time, to turn from the results of creation to the mystery of creation, from the world of creation to the creation of the world. So while we can't physically be together for Shabbat, we can create holy time together. Light those candles, mark the day, connect in whatever ways we have available to us. And remember, holiness is not about location. Holiness is about perspective and choice. Be well.